it's Mary Howden here from the Women's Rights Network, and I'm really pleased to be introducing a podcast with Zoe Hollowood, who is the chair of the Liberal Voice for Women, which is a caucus a gender critical caucus which works across parties and is about encouraging and making sure there's rigour where women's rights are concerned within policies, within political parties. And with her, we have Elaine Miller, who is a physiotherapist who you'll know by her campaigns around being dry by Christmas or dry by Easter, as I think is currently running, where she encourages us all to do pelvic floor exercises. She's also an award-winning comedian, and I've seen her show, and she is actually very, very funny. So if you've not seen her and she's on anywhere, go and see her. But today they're not here for that reason. What they're here to do today is to discuss women's involvement in politics, involvement in the political sphere in a range of ways. And Elaine has brought together some stuff which she learned from when she stood as a local councillor last year, and Zoe is here to discuss that with her. So I'm going to hand over to you, Zoe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks for those kind words. So just to reiterate, what we're focused on today is talking about encouraging more women into politics. We know that many women have expressed they feel politically homeless on the sex gender issue, and it's concerning both that women are self-excluding from this political sphere generally, and really specifically around this particular issue. So this is not about pointing women to any one particular party or indeed to run as an independent, but rather encouraging women back into the political sphere, encouraging them to stand if they want to, and even giving them some tools and advice that may help them. And it's also helping women who decide they don't want to stand, but who maybe want to help people campaign, or they want to ask great questions of politicians during the general election that's coming up. So Elaine, I'm going to hand over to you if you want to tell us a bit about why you decided to run last year in Scotland in a by-election and what your experience was.
Well, it wasn't my idea for a start. There had been the GRR bill had gone through, and I think it's probably fair to say that that piece of legislation was key to galvanising an awful lot of women here, myself included, because I had thought that I was quite politically aware, because if I was watching Question Time, I would recognise a couple of the people that were on it, and I would listen to any questions on Radio 4, and occasionally I would send an email into my MP or MSP. But after I made a bit of a show of myself in Hollywood at the end of the GRR bill, a woman had noticed that there was a by-election in my ward. So an SNP councillor had resigned over how Edinburgh City Council were treating local traders, and there was a vacancy. So it was suggested to me that I should stand. And I said, ha ha ha, that's hilarious. Can you imagine if I was in the council, my face has got subtitles, that would be a nightmare. And genuinely thought that they were joking. And then they took me for a Mexican and made me drink lots of wine. And I was like, this is a brilliant idea. This will be fine. And the aim was to run as an independent candidate with the point of it was to try and gather information about how that works so that we could create a pack, but also create a fuss. Like, we wanted to see if we could use the opportunity of a by-election to get press to keep the focus on what had happened in Scotland with women's rights and what we had lost, rather than what the trans activists had won.
Right.
So we did that. We achieved both things, and we had a great time in the process. I learned an awful lot, not least that my levels of ignorance about politics were huge. Even though I thought I knew a bit, I had absolutely no idea about how the democratic process actually all jigsaws together. and how like community councils slot into your local council, and that slots into Hollywood and then to Westminster and House of Lords. I had no idea about the what I thought was quite like poor practices that are built into the system. So the first thing was I needed to get an electoral agent. So that was handy because I have a resident man who agreed that he would just be the one in charge. And the role of the election agent is to make sure that you're toeing the line and not doing anything that's illegal, because there's all sorts of rules and regulations. And we're very different people. So he's really good at rules and regulations. But because I was independent, I didn't have a political office to put down as the bricks and mortar address of my electoral agent. It had to be my home address. And I spoke to the council about that, because as an independent, I didn't really want my home address going out to 20,000 homes in the ward, because at the time I was getting a bit of hassle because I had made a show of myself in the Parliament and some people were very upset with me. So the idea of having my address where my kids live in the public domain when I was getting threats of arson was quite uncomfortable. And there is no way around it. The system is set up so that you can't use a PO box, and the council can't let you use their address because that would be seen to be showing bias. And I said to them, well, you are showing bias because everybody else has got a party headquarters that they use, and I don't have another bricks and mortar. Unfortunately, I haven't been sensible enough to get myself a second home that I could use. So this excludes women from the process, because I happen to live in a detached house with a driveway. So, and I live with, a man and two large teenage boys. So the dynamic of that, putting that address into the public domain, is very different from if I was a single mother with young kids living up a close, where if I'm coming up my driveway, I can see if there's anybody there. If I'm going in a close door, I can't. And I don't know that I would have run because of that if I didn't happen to have my own front door, which seems anti-democratic. And then I raised with the council, if I was an adoptive mother or a foster mother, I would not be allowed to put my address in the public domain. And he said, oh, which suggests to me that they've never really thought about that.
Okay.
So that's a problem.
And they had no solution for you?
No, there is no solution. Apparently the government are aware of it and they are looking to raise it at some point, but it'll probably be within the next 5 years. So it won't be resolved in time for the general election or the Scottish elections that are coming up. And I'm really cross about it, because if the narrative that's coming out from parties and all the different parliaments is we want more women to be involved in politics, well, how? You're excluding heaps and heaps of families. It's not possible. But I decided to do it anyway, because in for a penny. And also, although I was getting threats of arson, I did suspect that I knew who it was, and I knew that he would have to get 3 buses to get to my house. And I figured that was probably quite protective, because my impression of that individual is that he's quite lazy. He's not going to come. He's not going to get himself a wee tin of petrol and get 3 buses and walk half a mile to get to my driveway. I think it'd be all right. So we set about with a team of women that knew what they were doing. They were all women who had been involved in politics. Most of them are anonymous because they had to be, either to protect their work or themselves, because everybody knows this. If you're involved in this stuff, then sometimes you have family members that disagree with your view on sex and gender, and it just doesn't do any good to highlight that. Or it would be a problem for their workplace, or they might have been a member of a political party. And so if you're a member of a party and you're helping somebody else stand as an independent, then you could get kicked out your party.
Yes.
So there was quite a lot of care taken with the women that were in the team, because they were taking a risk, all of them. I you know, was already a known rocket. So I had nothing to lose, you know, with my expression of my democratic right to protest. I was already in trouble with my professional bodies and assorted members of my family. So I had ticked that box. So I think there was 6 of us to start off with.
And how did you contact those women, Elaine? Is it through a separate network that you know them?
No, they had organised it before they spoke to me.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, they had decided that they would go for the. I was headhunted. That's right. I think it was all sort of like happenstance. The one skill that I do have is speaking. So they knew that I would be comfortable public speaking. They knew that I would be able to think on my feet. Doing stand-up comedy is basic, really thorough training for doing politics, it turns out. And I know that when the parties are investing time and money into their candidates, sometimes they will send them for a stand-up course because it does make you better at speaking. I think we should do it the other way around. I think we should start grooming the comedians to go into politics because you're used to work in a room, and the skills are very, very similar. And also a lot of them just need to be a bit more engaging in I'm surprised at I don't want to criticise people, but I'm surprised at the quality of public speaking that I saw at a city council by-election. So it's not high-level politics, but it is a capital city. Like, these people are going to have power and have influence.
Yeah.
And some of them really were not good speakers. They didn't understand the basics of how to project your voice and how to. One of the candidates actually couldn't get up on her feet. She was shaking so hard.
Oh.
She was unable to talk and stand. And she won. That was the Lib Dem candidate. She won by an absolute landslide. And that woman, when she was given her acceptance like little talk at the end of the vote, and she had a piece of paper, and the paper was quivering so hard that if I had seen it on the TV, it looked like, this is going to sound really critical, but it's a good image. I don't mean to criticise this particular woman, but do you remember in the 80s when there was hostage videos and the person was reading a bit of paper and it was shaking?
Yeah.
That's what it looked like to me.
Gosh.
That she's gone into politics and she's clearly so uncomfortable about public speaking that she could not read her own words without looking like she was in a really scary situation. And I just thought, well, what are we doing? Because she didn't just win, she won by a landslide. And I'm sure she's very, very capable. You know, politically speaking, I'm sure she's got the skills. Otherwise, the Lib Dems would not have selected her. Mm-hmm. But you have to be able to get up and talk. So her party haven't given her enough confidence for her to be able to articulate, thanks very much, I'm feeling really pleased with myself. Did you see what I've just achieved? I nailed it. Mm-hmm. She looked like she was going to vomit. And I thought, I can help with all of that. One of the barriers to engage in politics is getting women to talk. There's a great quote by, who is it? Maggie Kerr. Probably got it written down somewhere. And it's speak even though your voice is shaking, which I love, because that's what we don't do. We wait until we've got all the evidence and we've practiced, and then eventually we might send an email. One of the most powerful things I think that's come out of all of this is Kelly J. Keen's series of events that she does, where she gets, she started off just get women to speak, but to get up publicly in a public setting, an open space where you've got trans activists shouting at you and the police are there because there can be a really threatening atmosphere at these events. And for women to get up and start talking is quite a jump. And it looked to me like this woman, who's now a city councillor, was scared. And I've seen women swallow down their fear at Kelly G's events and get up and speak anyway. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I can do something about that, because in stand-up, you learn the recipes of how to do it, how to get up and say it anyway, and how to manage if it's not going very well for a start. There's a few key skills that can make a real difference. And if you can get up and make a little talk to an event like Let Women Speak, then you can get up and speak anywhere. You can go and do a petition at your local council. You can go to speak to your MSP at a surgery, or your MP. You could go to the House of Lords and present. And I've done all of those things, and I think it's just because Stand Up taught me how to speak, even if my voice was shaking. And I think it's going to become more and more important as the run up to these elections happen, because we have to make ourselves heard. They're not going to help us do it.
So is that part of your toolkit as well, or is that something, that you want to talk about? Yeah.
What I'd quite like to, so the toolkit that we've got was, what did we learn about being standing as an independent? It's called I've got the flyer, the Elaine Miller Manual for the Politically Homeless. Excellent. And if you would like a copy, email into dangerousfemalesxx@gmail.com. And it's a pack about the practical things, like, so what happens when you say that you're going to stand, is then they don't even give you a map of your constituency. Like, the parties have that. The parties will on the wall have where the constituency boundaries are. I took me 3 weeks to figure out the boundaries of, like, which side of the road does the boundary fall on, because I don't want to have to go and leaflet the side of the road that it doesn't apply to. Yes. You don't get that. It's on the websites, but it's so small you can't see exactly where it's divvied up to. You also don't get automatically any of the electoral roll. You have to apply for that. So it took us about 3 weeks to get the information that we needed. And during that time, we were you need to have a leaflet to go and give people. So we built that, and there's a template of the leaflet and the posters and all the things that we produced. So you can just slot in your own photograph and put in your own little bit of the blurb, but the format of it is there. It took 125 women hours to divvy up the leaflets into bundles so that other women volunteers could go and deliver them through letterboxes. Yeah, it was a huge undertaking, because you need to work out how many letterboxes there are and work out how many leaflets that would be, because you don't want to send 4 hours of leafleting to a woman to do, especially not because it was February, it was freezing. Decided that a 200 block bundle was enough. So I had to split all the houses up into 200 blocks, and that some of them are tenements, some of them are houses with big long driveways.
Absolutely.
And work out what's practical. So is this little run that we've made up, has it got lots of stairs? Has it got poor lighting? Has it got barriers? So that if you've got a woman who's older that's volunteering for you, you don't want to send her up hilly areas if she's got a mobility problem. So we had worked that out so that it was just a sort of basic fundamental, like, this pack is for somebody that's able-bodied and doesn't have any problems with managing stairs. This one's on the flat.
And how many people did you leaflet, and how many people did you have helping you do that?
We had 20,000 doors to go through. And we had about 60 women in total gave us time. And it was amazing. It really was amazing. I keep getting, like, makes my nose tickle thinking about how this state of affairs that we've got means that women pull together. There was when I say it was cold, I mean it was absolutely perishing cold, and we had no problem with women volunteering. And they did it for absolutely nothing, just because they wanted to help make a fuss. And on the day of the count, we had women outside all the different polling stations in the snow for hours and hours, saying to people, do you know about our independent candidate, Elaine Miller? It's quite remarkable. This stuff matters because it makes a difference.
So when the women were dropping off leaflets, were they also canvassing people on the doorstep as well?
No, we didn't do that because there wasn't a manifesto. So if you're an independent, you don't need to have you would need to have some idea about where you stand on things so that you can answer questions at hustings. But we didn't have it's not a political party, so you didn't need a manifesto. I was standing on one issue, which was that women's rights weren't being sufficiently considered by Edinburgh City Council. And that was manifesting itself through things like the loss of single-sex change rooms in the leisure centre and bus routes that were being cut that were disproportionately impacting on older women living in suburbia that were becoming pretty socially isolated. The canvassing that we did, there was probably 4 of us that did that. I spent hours and hours and hours going around knocking on doors, 4 or 5 of us, and they were all women that had done canvassing for political parties and knew how to do it. The majority of it was just getting the leaflets out, and then we did stalls like the women's groups all do. So we had lots of that. We put the stalls up on street corners, made a Facebook page where we told people where we were going to be, and used it as an opportunity to evangelise about why these rights matter, why women's rights to privacy, safety and dignity are important. And women were volunteering to come to that, hand out leaflets and chat to people.
And what was the reception like?
It was almost universally wholly positive. I had 2 really negative reactions. One from a bloke that was maybe in his late 20s who said that I was disgusting because of the show that I'd made of myself. But to be fair to him, he did stop and talk for a bit. He was going off to play, to do his rugby training. So we got speaking about, well, you know, do you want to hear about why I did it? And he thought that it was because I hated trans people, because that's what the narrative is online, that, you know, I want these people dead, like any of us that speak up. And this is something that frustrates me about the politicians that are in place, because they're pushing this story. They're saying that we are against these people, that we want them to just, you know, be eradicated. And it's most exasperating, because it just demonstrates that they have absolutely no understanding about why so many women are concerned about this. They've completely misunderstood the point.
Do you think they've misunderstood, or do you think they're politics?
Well, I'm such a Pollyanna. I choose to believe that they misunderstand, because then I have the hope that all we need is a nice wee conversation over a cup of tea. I hope that it's a misunderstanding, because the alternative is actually terrifying, because there is no solution to that. We will land up losing political parties, because women won't vote for parties that are removing our rights. And as things become more and more unnerving in Scotland, we get more and more press, more and more people are realising that, in fact, this isn't an anti-trans issue. This is women's rights issues. It's women's basic needs that are being dismissed. And the consequences that could have for some of the political parties are stark. They're all losing membership. Where do you think
they are?
Where do you think that women are going? It's
politically homeless trends quite often, doesn't it? So I was just wanting to ask you, when you did your canvassing, obviously those of us who canvass for political parties, we often have software and apps that help us collecting that information. Did you have something like that, or paper forms, or what were you guys doing?
I had a notebook that I scribbled
classic.
in. So we were, what I was hoping to get was, what are the issues, the local issues that people are concerned about? Like, that's really the point of politics, isn't it? To try and solve people's problems and make life easier for them. And then that was stuff that I would use to try and think about solutions in case I got asked it at hustings.
Right.
And also, if I'm honest, so that I could raise it to provoke the other parties at hustings, because none of them were local. None of the other candidates. That's not true. The Libertarian chap lived just outside the ward, and the Green candidate lived inside the ward. None of the others were resident in the ward.
So why don't we talk about hustings? Because I think people will be really interested to hear about your experience of hustings and what it was like, you being in there, and what a difference, you know, having you there made, and any questions as well from the audience. Do you want to talk us through that?
I had never been to hustings until I was in one. So it's just like question time. There's a table of candidates. There's an audience of people that are interested in what they've got to hear. Sometimes there aren't a lot of people that go to hustings. They tend to be in church halls or community centres, and I think it's often the community council will organise one, and then other groups, so Friends of the Earth might host one, and they're looking to speak to the candidates about their green credentials, and the members of Friends of the Earth would go. They were actually brilliant fun. I don't think I've had such a hoot for a long time. Somebody said it was like an Alan Bennett play. It really was genuinely hilarious, because you've got such a strange spread of people that are, putting themselves forward. That sounds really, really horrible, doesn't it? People have got different experiences and different views, and it can get quite heated when you've got two people that fundamentally disagree with each other on a political issue. Then they got quite heated at one point. They work in different ways. You can have questions that are submitted ahead of the hustings. You can have questions from the floor. You can do them online. They have Zoom hustings now. There's not really rules about how the hustings are conducted, but you should invite all the candidates of each candidate should be invited. And if you don't invite a candidate, you should say why. I'd really like to see that in the run up to the election, every constituency has a women's hustings, because it's not difficult to organise, and you can eyeball them and ask them the questions that they do not want to be asked. There's nowhere to hide in hustings. Yep. So you have to get up on your feet, assuming you're able to both stand and talk, and answer, which I think I've learned. I've developed real respect for the people who are standing as political candidates, because they have to know their manifesto backwards. They have to be able to apply that and not say the thing that they're not supposed to say. It's much easier as an independent, because you just give your opinion. So there should be a chair that gives everybody the same amount of time to respond, and everybody gets a shot of answering first and being last. It's obviously easier if you're not first to answer the question, because you can crib off of everybody else. But you can be asked absolutely anything at all. And that was fine for me, because that's just stand-up, isn't it? That's just doing an audience interaction. And I also had nothing to lose, because as an independent, it's unlikely that you'll get elected. It's not easy to get elected without the party machine behind you, which can be very freeing, because it's an act of provocation. Effectively, you're a wild card. So the parties, my impression is that they collude at hustings. So we did one that the Lib Dems didn't send their candidate to for, I'm sure there was valid reasons. No, I don't. But they just didn't want her in a room with me. But I'm sure there was valid reasons behind it. And they did send that one of the existing councillors to come and listen in, and he hates me, I think, because from the body language that was oozing out of him. But that's because I chased him off my doorstep when he was canvassing one time. Because I said, of course you can have my vote. You can have my vote if you answer one question. And his wee face lit up, and I said, what is a woman? And he just, eventually he actually ran down my path. Anyway, so you're effectively a wild card, and the political parties don't want that. They want to have quite a predictable hustings, because then they can, coach their candidates. And if you've got somebody that can say and do anything, include potentially drop her knickers, it's quite unnerving for them. It's really powerful to be eyeball to eyeball with somebody who wants something from you. They want your vote. They want people to turn up, because the people who turn up to the hustings tend to vote. So they want to make friends with you, make a good impression, and go away thinking, that went well. I've definitely got 20 votes out of that. Because a lot of the time, the vote comes down to, a ball here between two candidates, that every vote really does matter. And they don't appreciate somebody that could take those away from them. That they can't predict. So they lasted, I think it was about 2 hours and I had, sitting at the front, notes and water. We were asked a variety of things. There was questions about buses. There was questions about, there had been problems with roadworks here, and that's what had led to the local traders losing money, which is why the SNP councillor had resigned in the first place, because he thought there should be due compensation. So there was a lot of that stuff about bins, questions about rats. There's a rat problem. Which was really quite funny, because the Libertarian guy decided that he would solve the problem by giving teenagers air guns to shoot the rats. And what's his name? I've forgotten their name. The party, the family party, the Scottish Family Party, thought that we could put contraceptive into the food for the rats and the pigeons, and I thought that was hilarious, because if contraceptives are good enough for pigeons, they're surely good enough for me. And so it was just funny.
Yeah.
But from a pushing people to talk, candidates to talk about subject areas that the parties would rather avoid, it's worth doing, because they have to come and take their medicine and actually engage in these subjects, or they turn you down. And either way, the optics are bad for a party. We were not going to talk to women, or we're not going to listen to what women want to say.
And what
They're
would you
going to have
say?
to up the game.
And what would you say for women who, they're not going to stand, but they do want to be engaged and go to hustings? What advice would you have for them about, asking questions and killer questions?
Practice what you want to say and sing it. Like, there's tips that somebody had said to me, that you sing your question, you say your question in different accents, you say it really, really slowly, or say it really, really fast. Go through it backwards, so that when you get up on your feet, that you can say it without stumbling over it. And know what the answer is that you want. So I would work backwards. What is it that you want out of that candidate? So if it's something that you want to give them an opportunity to do well with, because there are flashes of brilliance in politics, and if you've got somebody that you agree with on women's rights, or you want to encourage them, you could give them a gift of a question, and that's perfectly legitimate and tactical. Or if you want to set them a trap, which is what I would, because I don't think I'm very nice anymore. So what's the purpose? What's your aim? What is it that you want to know? Do you want to actually get an answer from them on something that you're unsure about? Do you want to draw attention to a local issue? Do you want to highlight a lack that they have or their party has? Or do you want to use it as an opportunity to give them praise and a bit of a carrot, and elevate the profile, and then form your question around that, and then practice your question? And what I would like to do is get the groups of women that are running the hustings to sort of coach each other, so that you that you can get up and speak your question your own in the room, and that you can speak it in front of your friends, and they'll give you feedback about, don't stand and shuffle, don't speak down into your chest, stand up, take a deep breath and speak firmly. And if you can do it in front of your friends, you can do it at the hustings. And if you can do it at the hustings, then you can speak anywhere.
Fantastic. Just one more question, actually. So women, when they're thinking about holding these hustings, so hiring a public hall, etc., what advice do you have to get people there? Because obviously I've seen some pictures where they ended up with rubber chickens because candidates didn't attend the hustings, right? So any advice you have for women thinking about running hustings?
Yes, so that was the Women Won't Waste by-election, the by-election in Rutherglen, and they held a hustings, and the usual party candidates wouldn't attend. So they had blow up chickens to empty seat those people. If they won't attend, there's nothing you can do about it, but you can highlight it. And I think that that would be useful from a women's network point of view, all the women's networks point of view, because if parties are consistently refusing to attend hustings, well, what does that say about them and how they are engaging in the democratic process? It's a reasonable expectation that if you want my vote, you will come and talk to me about it and explain to me where you stand on these issues. That's not an unreasonable thing to request of a candidate. Yeah. And if it becomes a theme that some parties are reluctant to go and speak at women's hustings, then we will be able to, I would traction that online. I would absolutely milk it for everything that it was worth, because we are 52% of the population and we won't be ignored. So they can attempt to ignore us, but you can make life quite uncomfortable for them, I think. I said, what good is that? Yeah. You invite everybody. If they come, they come. They don't. If they don't, and they don't have a good reason for it, then I would exploit it. If they do come, well, then they do deserve some credit, because at least they've turned up, even if they say things that they don't agree with. I would advertise it as widely as you can. The Rutherglen hustings, they had a packed hall, which is quite unusual. Like normally in local politics, it's quite unusual that people would turn out to come to these things. But I think there's quite an appetite now, certainly amongst women, that we would make an effort to turn up to something. So advertise it as many places as you can think of. And get yourself some tea and coffee if you've got capacity for that in the place, because everybody appreciates a wee one of those wee pink wafer biscuits. Everybody's a sucker for that. And the format of how to actually structure it is all in the pack. Things like getting the local press along, because if you're holding it, then there might be a news story that comes from it. You might be able to get a bit of coverage. So how to write a press release is in there, so that you can tell the journalists, this is happening, are you interested? You can stream it if you wanted to for people that can't make it along, because lots of people have got, care responsibilities or mobility problems, or the bus isn't running. So there's loads of options about how to do that as well, and make it warm and welcoming, because it's supposed to be a good thing. These are all people that are giving up their time to care about politics and what happens in their community. So that's why I think if I was running them, I would get quite a lot of, I was going to say pink wafers again, but I suppose it should be Tunnocks tea cakes, really.
Oh, absolutely. And so what's next for you then, Elaine? You've done one by-election. What's next on the agenda?
Well, there is a general election coming, isn't there? And my MP hasn't answered an email from me for quite some period of time. So I am quite drawn to that idea of being at Hastings, just to ask her some questions. The problem would be depending on what other parties are standing in my area, because Alba were talking about putting forward a candidate. So then you could have a situation where if I was standing and people were voting for me, that would be potentially a lost vote to another party that were saying that women are women and they would stand up for women's rights. So I don't know what will happen, because we would need to have a team. You can't do it on your own, and it is a big commitment, and it does it does irritate my children somewhat.
It's all-consuming campaigning, isn't
it? Yeah, it's a lot. Like there was a lot of just things like A-boards. If you're in a party, then you have wooden boards that you can put your poster up outside the voting stations. Right. But if you're on your own, you need to actually get A-boards, and then you need to physically put posters onto them and store them and deliver them and remove them on the day of the vote. So where are you going to get that from, and how are you going to raise the money, and then where are you going to store them afterwards? So that sort of practical thing, our house looked like a warehouse for quite a long time. Which is fine for me because the kids are older, but there's nobody that's got a visual disability that's going to fall over A-boards in the night, or little kids that are going to pull them on top of themselves. So we could do it, but yeah, it was a bit bedlam. I loved it. It was good fun. So I'm not saying I won't stand. And at the moment, I think I'm so exasperated with the pure hypocrisy of the organisations that are given central funding, they're given government money, taxpayers' money, to run events to try and encourage women into politics. But actually, I don't think they're doing it seriously. I don't think that if you're not going to see that women are female and that sex can make an impact on somebody's life and that it matters in some circumstances, then I don't think that you can do your job of attracting more women into politics.
I think these are very good points.
Yeah.
So Elaine, why don't you finish off by telling us again where people can write to get this wonderful pack that you've been telling us about?
It's if you use Twitter, it's at Let's Get Elected. So all one word, obviously. Let's LETSGETELECTED. Let's Get Elected. And if you email us, it's dangerousfemalesxx, all one word, no spaces, @gmail.com. So dangerous and females, plural with an S, and then xx @gmail.com, and we will send you out the pack, and it's got links to helpful resources like what Women's Right Network has, and Sex Matters, and the Scottish Feminist Network, and Women's Place, For Women Scotland, MBM, all of the main big groups that are doing such powerful things to try and sort this mess out.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. Thank you, Elaine. Mary, I wasn't sure if you had anything else to say before we went up.
No, I just think that was such a fascinating conversation in terms of, not only Elaine's experience there about kind of doing it herself, but just thinking about how we can get involved in the elections coming up and how we can be a bit more proactive about, actually arranging hustings in our areas and getting involved in that. And I suppose, Elaine, you were saying in your speech, in your chat there, that you wanted to encourage people to do that. And I wondered if you had any other ideas about how you would do that, as well as the great pack that you've put together.
Well, I have a wall planner, Mary, that you'll be pleased to hear about. Mary teases me because I'm very disorganised, and you're so generous that you were willing to give me a hand to sort it out. So now I have a wall planner, and it's even got different coloured Sharpies on it. So my plan is to start going back to gigging. The problem that I have is I'm horribly cancelled within comedy terms. I won't get a gig in a comedy club anymore. So if I can go somewhere where there's women that want to hear about things, then I could do a face-to-face session about public speaking and how to do it. And I could do a show at night and run it as a sort of fundraiser thing for this and also for the women's groups. So I think that's the next thing that I need to start organising around the country.
Great, that sounds fantastic. We'll look forward to that. I'd just really like to thank you both for taking part in that discussion, and I'm sure you'll be very busy, Zoe, during the upcoming elections as well, out there doing all this campaigning. So thank you for taking the time, both of you, to chat with us.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Elaine.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this Women's Rights Network podcast. We hope you found it interesting and useful. If you've ever considered attending a hustings but perhaps thought it was not for you, give it a go this year. It's never been more important. You can find out all about the WRN over at womensrights.network. And if you would like to join us, go to womensrights.network/join-WRN.